Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. In today's episode, we learn all about the life of Bourgine. She was a runway model in Paris, a jazz singer, and now we learn about the next chapter of her life. I hope you guys enjoy the show. So welcome to the show, Kay. How are you?
I am fine. Looking forward to this.
I'm very excited to talk to you today. You are originally from Boston, but you grew up in a Franco-American family and now live in France. Tell us more.
So my dad was American of Lithuanian origin. Both of my American grandparents were from Lithuania, and my mom was French. So I was her first child, and she barely spoke English and knew very little about America. She had spent 6 months in New York City on a Fulbright scholarship and then moved back to France and then married my dad and moved to Boston, already pregnant with me.
That's incredible. Good for her.
Yeah. So she was very French when I was a kid. And, when she was dying, my brother and sister and I spent that last week of her life with her, with my two sons. And we read we went through her papers and photos and sang songs. And one of the things we read was this story she had written for us where she wrote that she was raising savages.
Wow.
Yeah. And we're not sure because we didn't ask her at the time, which is really a shame. But, des sauvages in French would just mean that we were, wild, but in English, she had written it in English and she said she was raising savages, and you read that and you're like, wow, were we really that bad? Because I don't think we were, but
she was speaking Franglish.
I think so. Yeah.
That's really sweet, though. It's good that you guys could all be together. And I'm sure being in a bicultural upbringing that shaped you a little bit creatively as well with your language. And talk a little bit about that.
I'm sure it did, too. Yeah. My mom actually started a bilingual school in Boston when I was 3 and my brother was 2. And the first year it was in the basement of our house. And it's a bilingual school that's still thriving in Boston. Called the École Bilingue Internationale. And my mom was she was great with that. Like, we had a bunch of puppets and this little wooden puppet show thing. And every Friday night, my American grandparents would come over for drinks before we all went out to a Chinese restaurant called South Pacific for dinner. And my brother and I would do a show every Friday night.
No way, that's a lot.
Yeah. Every single Friday night, we would do a puppet show, or we would play a concert on the piano, just totally improvising, both of us, or we would dance. It was a big part of our life. And I wrote my first short story when I was 5.
Wow, that's incredible.
About digging a tunnel all the way through the world to the other side, to China.
That's so good. I love it. So you've been an artist since birth, it sounds like. Growing up in this very talented family.
Yeah, I think I have. We had a costume chest with all sorts of old clothes and things to dress up in. And my brother and I did that all the time too. And I started dance class when I was 5 years old. So
yeah, talk about that. You've been dancing for a very long time. Was that something that's always been part of your life? How did that shape you?
It has been a huge part of my life. Yeah. As a child, I started at 5 and all through, I'm not sure exactly at what age I started dancing more seriously, but I took dance class 3 times a week, which is a lot. And I was incredibly lucky that in the suburb of Boston where I grew up in Newton Center, the ballet teacher at this music school, local music school, the All Newton Music School, was an incredible teacher. She ended up being the ballet mistress at Boston Ballet, which is one of the best ballet companies in the United States. So she was really good. And when I was a kid, she was teaching at this little school. And every year we had teachers come from the Royal Academy in London to give us the exams. And we worked really, really hard. When I arrived in Paris and wanted to work as a dancer, I realized that the training, I hadn't been taking class for several years, but I realized the training I'd gotten as a kid was so good that I could keep up with people.
Wow. I mean, how lucky were you to have someone like that, teach you from such a young age? That's so nice.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I really was lucky because her technique was incredible and she was kind. Some ballet teachers are not. Yeah. And she was very rigorous, but with kind discipline. So I learned a lot. I used to spend hours in front of the mirror just practicing just des relevés, des pointes, just really basic things, and gave myself ballet feet.
Wow. Oh my goodness. And then you also traveled the world as a runway model. Talk about that.
So, when I was in college, my senior year, I broke up with my boyfriend, and one night a friend took me to a roller skating rink. There was only one in the city at the time, and I just fell in love with skating and dancing on roller skates, which became the coolest thing in New York City. So I started performing on skates. In fact, the first runway show I did was on roller skates. And I went around to the agencies in New York City, and Wilhelmina said, "We'll take you, but you're not a classic beauty. If you really want to do this, you need to go to Paris or Milan." So I said, "Okay, cool. I can go to Paris. That's easy. I speak the language. I can stay with my grandmother at the beginning and, figure it out." And I came to Paris for 6 months, and it's been more than 40 years. 40 years.
Wow. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So it definitely worked out for you.
Yes, it did. And I spent the first 10 years working as a runway model in haute couture and dancing on TV behind French pop stars.
That is such an exciting life. I think any teenage girl would be like, what? You moved to Paris and got to do all these crazy fun things?
Yeah, it was really, really fun. And one of the things I enjoyed was the contrast between the two, because as a model, I was working with Christian Lacroix and Hermès and Paco Rabanne and Dior and these, the chicest of the chic. And then on TV, I was dancing behind. I did Les Champs-Élysées and Les Jeux de, Les Enfants du Rock, but I also did Les Jeux de 20 Heures and L'Académie du Neuf and all these really tacky French shows. Mostly behind Karen Cheryl, who you probably have never heard of, but she was a big star in the 80s. And she was a real French pop star, and I danced behind her for several years.
So what was it like being a model, like in Paris? I mean, it sounds glamorous, but was it hard? Was it dangerous? What was it really like?
It's an interesting job. Well, I started late. Like I started a year after I had graduated from college. So I was, young, but I was an adult. I wasn't like a 16-year-old. I think it's a really dangerous profession to be in when you're very young, because emotionally, it's really, really tough. As life is for all creatives, one day when you're a model, one day they're like, "Oh my God, you're so beautiful. You're perfect. Oh, I love you." And then the next day they look at you and they're like, "Did you gain weight? And like, why are you here? I asked for blondes and you're not blonde," or things like that. So you have to have a thick skin. You have to have a lot of self-confidence to survive and not get depressed. People want you and then they don't. So for young people, for teens, I think it's really challenging. And it was for me too, but I was old enough to be able to handle it. And that is actually why I got involved in haute couture, because I hated the whole modeling agency scene. Yeah. where you hang out and you go out to the discotheques, and there are these 16-year-old girls going out with 50-year-old men. And like, I hated the whole scene. And you spend a lot of time just sitting around waiting, etc. I mean, you spend a lot of time sitting around waiting anyways,
Yeah.
because you're always waiting to get your hair done or your makeup done or the clothes ready or whatever.
Yeah.
But I chose my clients for the trips, and I traveled all around the world.
That's fantastic. I mean, what a life. And then dancing behind these famous pop French stars. Like, it's so, were they most of them nice? Or you didn't really get to talk to them. You just danced and had to get away, and that's that.
Well, Karen was really nice because I worked with her a lot. And the other ones, like, when I did people like Jean-Jacques Goldman or Bernard Lavillier, you don't really meet them. You're just, you have your choreography, you have what you're supposed to do, and you're behind them while they're singing, and that's it.
That's
Um,
so funny. I would love to see those videos.
oh, I have a couple. If you need, I can show you. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And do you feel seen or invisible in those roles when you're a dancer or a model? How does it feel?
That's an interesting question. As a model, it depends on the kind of job. When you're doing, like, I was with Christian Lacroix, I was a house model with him for 6 years when he was the designer at Jean Patou. So there were six of us, and we were attached to the Maison de Haute Couture Jean Patou, which means that he actually created the clothes on us, on our bodies, on our personalities. We would be available to him all day, every day in January and in July for the Haute Couture collections. And that was a really privileged relationship because, yeah, he was creating these outfits inspired by us. And we did shows every Tuesday and every Thursday at 3:00. So in that aspect, I felt very seen and valued and appreciated. Christian used to call me Rita Hayworth
Wow.
because I have broad shoulders and my hair is sort of Rita Hayworth-ish. And but then when you do the press shows, the big shows, they give most of your outfits to the stars, and it's not the same thing at all. So,
Yeah.
then you're doing shows with the big stars of the day, Inès de la Fressange and Mounia, and you don't, you're just like in the background wearing two, maybe three of your outfits while the stars wear all the really beautiful ones. So,
But how special is that he made the outfits on you, like for you, inspired by you? That would be so fun as a young woman.
it was incredible. Yeah, that aspect of it was really incredible. And Christian is a very kind and interesting man. And I loved that. I loved being part of the creative process, and I loved watching all the seamstresses. It was just incredible. When I started there for the first 2 years, there was a woman whose job was making the hats. That was all she did. She made the hats. And there was one woman who was in charge of the flou, everything that was like draped and light silks and things like that. And then there was one woman who was in charge of all the suits, responsable des tailleurs. And it was incredible the way to observe the way clothes are made in haute couture. Everything's done by hand.
It's so special, and like to admire that talent, like I just have no idea how they can master those things. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible. And it was really cool, actually, to go back to my mom. In those days, I remember talking to my mom once and saying, someday I want to make a quilt, a crazy quilt. And my mom said, start saving the scraps from Jean Patou. And I did. And I had 3 bags of scraps that followed me around several moves in Paris, and then got brought back to my mom's house in the US. And the year before she died, my mom made me a crazy quilt with all of the scraps from Jean Patou and Christian Lacroix.
That's so special on so many levels. I love that.
It's really beautiful. I love it. And some of the scraps are from clothes I wore.
That is really special. What a great idea. Thanks, Mom. Like,
Yeah.
that's such a great idea.
Yeah.
And what was the pay like back then? Like, were you making like no money? It was just more like prestige.
No, no, no. I made a good living. I was, sometimes when people hear I was a model, they're like, "Oh, you were a star," and I said, "No, not at all. I was an ordinary model. I was like you know, I worked in haute couture, but like a normal model in haute couture. But we made a good living. Weren't making tons of money, but yeah, no, it was great, and having that sort of almost full time, well, I guess it would be part time job year round for 6 years was incredible because the rest of the time we could work for other people, but we knew we were going to make a certain amount of money. We did trips, at least 3 or 4 big trips to Latin America or Southeast Asia every year, and different countries in Europe. And it was incredible. So I made a good living for those years. Yeah.
It was so special. And then moving on to the next like chapter of your life, you raised children, and then in your 40s, you chose jazz singing. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's well, we talked about the fact that I was a dancer, so I always knew that, I was a dancer. And actually before I had kids, I studied acting really seriously for several years too with John Strasberg, Lee Strasberg's son. So I knew I was a dancer, I knew I could act, and I always thought that I wasn't a singer. It wasn't that I couldn't sing because I knew I could sing. I had been in glee club and small chorus when I was in high school, but I never got solos as a singer. So I thought, okay, I can dance, I can act, I can't sing, or I'm not a singer. And then when my kids were still in school, one of the moms one day said, "Kay, will you, accompany me to this jazz workshop thing? I really want to go, but I don't want to go alone." I said, "Sure." And I had so much fun that weekend. I just loved it. I had never studied jazz. You hear jazz all the time when you grow up in the US, but I loved Sarah Vaughan. So I had listened quite a bit to Sarah Vaughan. But that weekend, I realized you don't have to be Ella Fitzgerald to sing. And I started to study jazz. And I was in my mid 40s and I just fell in love with it and put together my first band, started performing in bars and restaurants, and then a different band, and then started writing my own songs, which had always felt like rocket science. But all of a sudden, I thought, wow, I can actually do this, and people like my songs. And little by little, when I performed, I would play mostly my songs with just 1 or 2 covers.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And I love Joni Mitchell. That's the music I love the most. So the music I write is sort of folk jazz fusion, really inspired by Joni. But I always worked with jazz musicians. So there was always improvisation in what I did.
That's super fun. And I love that you were able to just, go to this little workshop and just have some fun and then realize, hey, this is something I really want to do. I think that's why it's important we try these different things that we think, oh, I don't really want to do that, or we're not very good at that, or whatever. And they just don't know where it's going to lead you.
I totally agree. That has been a big theme in my life. When I was 12 years old, I did a silversmithing workshop and fell in love with that, borrowed $100 from my parents, bought all the tools I needed, and started a business selling silver jewelry to people in this little store in Newton Center, and my friends and my mom's friends. And that was just a workshop I did. The same with singing, the same with roller skating. Falling into working professionally as a dancer and a model really started with roller skating. And it was just because I had broken up with my boyfriend. I was free most evenings, and I started going to this rink every night.
That's so fun. I remember roller skating. That was like the 80s. We'd all go on Saturday. I never did learn how to stop, I will say. I just run into the wall. I feel like stopping on roller skates can be hard.
Yeah, I can teach you how to stop. I can teach
you. I think my roller skating days are over.
Mine are too, sadly.
So what did it feel like to perform at Sunside Sunset Jazz Club in Paris? That's like such a famous club.
It was incredible. It was incredible. When I first started singing, I remember my first goal was just to not have my eyes shut the whole time. And my second goal was to be able to improvise and not just sing the song straight. And then when I teach these days, I explain to people that when I first started performing, all I heard was the piano. And after maybe a year or so, one day, all of a sudden, I heard what the bass player was doing. And then a year later, all of a sudden, I could really hear what the drummer was doing. So it's a long process. And I never could have imagined when I started out that someday I would sing at the sunset. So it was incredible for me. That was a dream come true. And to perform my own songs and the last band I had was really personal. For the last 2 years I was performing, my band was guitar, cello, and voice.
Fun.
So,
I love that.
yeah, really acoustic, really intimate. And it fits my music really well. So, yeah, someday maybe I'll go back to that. I haven't, I've sort of put it aside for the moment.
But what a special journey, like to go from nothing to all that. That's a big deal.
Yeah, it was fun. It was exciting and extremely fulfilling. I mean, there's nothing more beautiful than, at the end of a concert, have somebody come up to you and say, oh, your song about whatever, moved me to tears or made me laugh or, that's an incredible feeling. And that's, this podcast is about creativity and why creative people do what they do. And I think it is for those moments. Part of it is for those moments. Part of it is just because you have to, because you can't not do whatever you do. But it's also for those moments of connection with other people where whatever you say or paint or dance or sing resonates with somebody else.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's all about connection. And that really is why a lot of us do what we do. It's a way to feel and connect with people we don't know at all.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And feel like that through knowing ourselves better and exploring creative pursuits, other people can see that reflected and understand themselves better.
Definitely. That's what it's all about. And then we're moving on to your next chapter where you had some personal health issues, which led you to discover, I'm probably going to say this wrong, Feldenkrais? Is this?
Feldenkrais. So I have scoliosis.
Okay.
And, I have had chronic pain most of my life. And as I got older, it got really challenging. So I started exploring Feldenkrais, and it's an incredible somatic practice of developing awareness through movement, and has deeply influenced everything I do. So everything I do now, because I teach a lot now, I facilitate groups, I lead training sessions, I do individual coaching, and everything I do is based on experiential learning, which is one of the principles behind Feldenkrais. So I don't teach, I create situations where people can live an experience, have an experience, and learn for themselves.
So it's all about doing.
Yes, it's about doing, and it's about exploring. It's about daring to fail, daring to try new things, daring to step out of your comfort zone. And one of the examples I often tell people when I'm working with improv is when you're improvising, you're definitely walking a tightrope, but the tightrope is 2 centimeters off the ground. So if you fall, you're not going to get hurt. And you can fall and get back up and fall and get back up. And when you learn through experiential learning, you really retain what you learn, and your body has the time to register it. Feldenkrais is a lot about developing connections between the brain and the muscles and the nerves.
That's
go
ahead. It's like we're on autopilot all the time. So this is really about really thinking about what we're doing and connecting to our body.
Yeah. It's not so much about thinking about what we're doing, but doing things slowly enough so that our brain can notice what we're doing. And so our brain can register the pleasure and the comfort as opposed to discomfort or pain. And so that we can rewire patterns of organization of the body. And what fascinates me is that as you reorganize your body, you also reorganize your brain.
That is fascinating. It changes everything.
Yeah, it's basically mindfulness through movement. And that's the way I also teach, or not teach, but facilitate public speaking, impactful communication, storytelling, media training, all of the other things I do. Because I do a lot of that with individuals and in companies. And I work in many different contexts. I coach the professors at HEC. I work with sex workers. I work with political refugees. I work in universities with young people for soft skills. I work in a lot of different contexts, and then in companies for team building and icebreakers and things like that.
It's incredible. And do you think that we can train ourselves to feel more at home in our bodies?
Of course. Yeah. That's what I teach people. I mean, what I teach people is how to use their breath, how to use grounding techniques, how to slow down, how to learn to be aware of their sensory cues so that they can ground themselves before it's too late, basically. You know, when we're nervous, if we notice the signs that we're hot or cold or sweaty, or our shoulders are up to our ears, or we're, playing with our hands, or whatever our personal signs are, if we notice them quickly, we can breathe and slow down and ground and be more in, I was going to say in control, but it's not about being in control, but just in sensory awareness, which gives authenticity and gives it gives off, people can sense when you're grounded and authentic.
Yeah, it's just like a sixth sense. We know.
Yeah, exactly. And if, when you're speaking in public or where you're performing, if you are authentic, if you are grounded, if you know why you're doing what you're doing, and if you have an intention to connect with the people who are in front of you, it's so much more effective than if you're just trying to do a good job and you're in your own world.
That completely makes sense. And what's one practical thing listeners can do today to reconnect to their voice?
Breathe out. Breathe out. Don't breathe in. Often when we're nervous, we just breathe in and in and in and in. I often tell the story when I'm teaching that when I first started studying jazz, and we would be sitting in a circle and we would go around and each person would have 2 bars to improvise or something. 2 bars before me, I would be breathing in. So when it was my turn to speak, I was like this, and I could or to sing, and nothing would come out. So it's about learning to breathe out into your sits bones if you're sitting, to breathe out into your feet if you're standing, to sense the support of the ground or the chair, and slow down. Take a beat, take a minute to observe your shoulders and your breath, where you sense your breath in your body, what the contact is with your feet and the floor. Make sure your legs aren't crossed and you're not sort of perched on the edge of one sits bone, one buttock, but both are in contact with the chair, or both of your feet are in contact with the floor. That's the first step.
Yeah, and I think that's very easy things we can do today. Like anybody can do those things, just being aware.
Yeah, exactly. Be aware of your breath, be aware of your contact with the floor or the chair, and breathe out. Empty your lungs and take your time to breathe in.
And if someone listening feels like it's too late to begin again, what would you say to them? I mean, as someone who's lived multiple chapters and careers, and what would you say to someone who's afraid to start again?
It is never, ever, ever, ever too late. That is, so many young people are amazed when I tell them my story. I have basically changed life, changed my life's path more or less every 10 years. And I totally stopped everything for, I think, 12 years or so when my kids were little, and was really a stay-at-home mom and I lived in the suburbs. I drove my kids around to sports and music and art and the Montessori school that was 30 kilometers away from where we lived. And
Wow.
yeah. And then I went back to performing. So I would say follow your heart, follow your dreams, and it's never too late. It's never too late. And it's a dangerous thing to say to people because making a living can be challenging. But I think there's always a way. I totally reinvented myself again in my mid-50s after my divorce. So it's always possible.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something we need to remember, because I think, like you said, a lot of young people get caught up like, oh, I need a career. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I like. And just remember, we're going to constantly be evolving and changing. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think you can always change what you're doing. So you should go for what you feel like doing in the moment. And if it doesn't work, well, you'll do something different.
Definitely. Well, I think that's a beautiful note to end on. And where can people connect with you and learn more about your work?
So I have a YouTube channel, I have a Facebook, I have Instagram. My website is coming soon. That has been a long process because I think I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so it's hard for me to finish it. But it will be coming soon. And I have LinkedIn page. So I'm on most of the social media platforms, under K Bourgine. And then the company name for what I do with collaborative vocal improvisation is Circle Songs Paris. I was just going to say that's sort of the focus of what I do these days is leading groups in collaborative vocal improvisation based on my training with Bobby McFerrin.
Very cool. Well, we'll definitely share all of that in the show notes. And thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Well, you're very welcome. It was a pleasure.
Thanks so much for tuning in to La Vie Creative. You can find more information on MissParisPhoto.com. And if you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word for all my creative guests. We have the power to help them to keep doing what they love. See you next time.